There are 4 ways to describe pairs of statements, and we've already examined 2 of those ways in an earlier lecture. The first way we talked about describing statements is logical equivalency. Logically equivalent statements are statements that have matching truth values underneath their main operators. When one statement is true, the other statement is true. When one statement is false, the other statement is false. Okay, so the column of truth values underneath the main operators match exactly. As you can see here in the first statement, the statement is false on lines 1, 2, and 4, and the same thing here in the second statement, 1, 2, and 4, and they're both true on line 3. So logically equivalent statements. Logically equivalent statements that have the same simple statements comprising the compound statements are not just logically equivalent, they're also semantically equivalent. They're communicating the same information about the same things. Okay? If we look at the 2 truth tables, though, and we recognize, well, they don't match on every single line. On some lines, this one's false and this one's true, but on at least one line, they're both true, like you have here. Then these are consistent statements. These are statements for which it's possible for them to be both true at the same time. It doesn't matter. It's not significant that they're matching false truth values on lines 2 and 3 here, or that they're not matching truth values on line 4. What matters is that they're both true on line 1, and that's what allows us to describe these 2 statements as consistent statements. On the other hand, if we see that the columns of truth values underneath the main operators are exactly opposite one another, when one is true, the other is false, when one is false, the other is true, all the way down, these are contradictory statements. You can see here, line 1, true, false, line 2, false, true, and so on and so forth, okay? So these are contradictory statements. These are statements that can never be true at the same time, okay? And then finally, the last way we have of describing statements is inconsistency. And when we describe statements as inconsistent, this is what we mean. We're not saying it's not possible for them to both be false at the same time. What we're saying is it's not possible for them to both be true at the same time. It's not that they're contradictory. It's just that there's no line on which they're both true. So when you look at these 2 statements here in their truth tables, you can see over here on line 1, this one's true and this one's false. On line 2, they both match. They're both false. On line 3, this one's true and this one's false. And on line 4, this one's true and this one's false. So there's no shared line on which both of these statements are true. And that tells us these are inconsistent statements. It's not possible for them to both be true at the same time. Okay? Now keep this in mind. All contradictory statements are inconsistent statements because all contradictory statements are going to have opposite truth values on every line of their truth value. So they're never going to have a shared line where they're both true. Okay? But not all inconsistent statements are contradictory statements. And you can see that reflected here where we have line 2, they're both false. Okay? So those aren't contradictory, but they are inconsistent.